Today we're focusing on the shock attack of the Space Wolves. Let's talk about the perfectly sensible Space Marines who try their hand at riding alpha predators into battle. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're focusing on the Space Wolf Thunderwolf Cavalry, perhaps one of the most unlikely Space Marine units that you might expect to see in the 41st millennium, but probably one of the last things that you want bearing down on you. In this video we'll take a look over their datasheet, any obvious rules, combos and synergies, and how I would think about using them in game. In the background, the Thunderwolf Cavalry are a secretive formation deployed by the Space Wolves, not appearing in any official Imperial records. They are only deployed in the direst of circumstances, and their existence is considered semi-mythological. Thunderwolves are monstrous beasts, 8 feet high at the shoulder, with fur as thick as steel wire and teeth that can chew through steel. Breaking in such a mighty predator is considered a great feat amongst the Wolf Guard, and once a mount is secured, it is often augmented even further by bionic limbs, adamantium teeth, or the addition of razor-sharp metal claws. All very nice, so let's see what they can do on the tabletop. So here we have the datasheet for the Thunderwolf Cavalry. They're a fast attack choice, and at base they are 45 points per model. You get between 3 and 6 of them in a unit, and they have a fairly respectable stat line, a movement of 10, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength 4, toughness 5, 4 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 8 and a 3+ save. Toughness 5 and 4 wounds is pretty decently hard to shift, and a movement of 10 will get them where they need to go quickly, both good things in 9th edition 40k. Each Thunderwolf rider is armed with a bolt pistol, Astartes chainsword, crushing teeth and claws, and frag and crack grenades, so in their default setup they're pretty much an anti-infantry blender. They are a core unit, which means they can use any character buffs that they need to. They have the Wolf Guard keyword, which allows them to be fearless when they're nearby Logan Grimnar, and they are cavalry as opposed to infantry, which does have its downsides to be honest. It means that they can't move through terrain quite as freely, and they won't be taking advantage of any light cover on the board. Finally though, and one of their most important updates in the new codex, was their Swift Hunters special rule. This one allows them to advance and charge, netting them an average threat range on the charge of just over 20 inches. Your opponent's going to have to keep a lot of the table clear if they don't want to get charged by these guys turn 1 or turn 2. In terms of their war gear, every single Thunderwolf gets to attack with its crushing teeth and claws. The mount makes 3 attacks on top of the rider's attacks, and they're made at strength 5, AP -2 and damage 1. Really quite a nice little buff against infantry. You'll usually be hitting on 2s on the charge, and it means that you typically get 6 attacks per guy when you charge in. As I mentioned, the riders start with an Astartes chainsword and bolt pistol, though I would personally always swap out that bolt pistol for a storm shield. It only costs you 5 extra points, it gets you a 2+ save and a 4+ invul, and just makes the unit far more durable. Only 5 points for that increase in durability is an absolute steal. It's a really small upgrade per model when you're getting that extra invul and extra saving throw on a massive Thunderwolf with 4 wounds. It means you've got a decent chance of shrugging off incoming las cannon shots, and can basically ignore any small arms with no AP. From there you have the choice of either taking a bolt pistol or plasma pistol, or a melee weapon. For me there's not really much choice in this. The bolt pistol, bolt gun or plasma pistol can't be shot after you've advanced, and usually you're going to want to advance to make use of Swift Hunters. Therefore I'd pretty much always equip them with 1 storm shield and 1 melee weapon. I could see a potential argument for a few of the different options. My favourite melee weapons are the ones on this list. If you wanted to keep one just as cheap as possible, you could run one with a chainsword and storm shield just to be a bullet catcher. That way you're barely losing any investment once he goes down. I would be still very tempted to upgrade even the cheap bullet catchers to at least lightning claws though. They're only 5 points extra. You still get the extra attack, and they're just far more powerful against every target than the chainsword, particularly anything with fairly high toughness, where re-rolling the wound is really going to help. As the rules stand at the moment, lightning claws cost the same amount as power swords or power axes, while just being flat better against pretty much everything. You could think about taking a lightning claw or even a pair of lightning claws on the sergeant. The Space Wolves do have a stratagem to give a sergeant a relic with the Thane of the Retinue stratagem. Could potentially be quite powerful to give him strength 5 lightning claws with a flat damage of 2. Finally though, Space Wolves have excellent synergy with power fists and thunderhammers, so I would most certainly think about including my main damage dealers with either one of these. Both Hunters Unleash the Chapter Tactic and Savage Fury their unique assault doctrine both work slightly better on things like power fists and thunderhammers as they get a bigger relative boost. I could honestly be tempted to take either power fists or thunderhammers. I did a bit of a math hammer comparison video recently. The fists are a bit better versus 2 wound infantry, particularly if they've got 3+ or better armor saves. and hammers are slightly better point for point versus 3 wound infantry, and slightly better versus vehicles point for point. Honestly, both of them work and could easily be justified. If you were thinking about taking just one Thunderhammer though, then it might as well go on the pack leader, as he gets an extra attack. In general, I'd think about running a unit of 5 of these, with 3 or more with Power Fists or Thunderhammers, and you could think about including a couple with either Chainsaws or Lightning Claws to act as some cheaper bullet catchers. So how can we get a bit more out of our Thunderwolves then? As we mentioned, Hunters Unleashed and Savage Fury will go excellently with them, extra buffs to combat never hurt, and you really can get some pretty crazy damage output if you're charging in the Assault Doctrine. +1 attack with Shock Assault, +1 to hit, exploding 6s and extra AP are all very nice buffs on a very scary unit. 5 of them with Power Fists averages something like 18 wounds with no other buffs whatsoever if you are charging in the Space Wolves Assault Doctrine. You can think about buffing them with things like characters though those characters might struggle to keep up somewhat. Wolf Lords and Battle Leaders with their rerolls can be decent, and I'd be tempted to include them on bikes, Thunderwolves or with jump packs so they can keep up. You could potentially think about Chaplain Listeners, +2 to charge doesn't hurt, and nor does rerolling hits in the fight phase. And Logan Grimnar, as well as giving his excellent rerolls, also has a bit of synergy with them as well, as he does make them fearless. For psychic powers, within the Space Wolf Codex itself, you have Stormcaller to give them an extra +1 to their saves, very strong when combined with an already 2+ armor save from a Storm Shield. And you could think about taking a Murderous Hurricane as well, which can deny Overwatch and ensure that you are fighting first. It's quite interesting that you could take the Librarius Discipline as well. Veil of Time actually works really well with Thunderwolves. It allows you to reroll advance and charge rolls, and Thunderwolves are one of the only units in the game that will make use of both of those, as of course they get to advance and charge with Swift Hunters. Otherwise you can get Obsec on them via a Warlord trait in the Core Codex book. You could use the Wolfenstone or Ragnar Blackmane to reroll some charges, though again Ragnar might have some difficulty keeping up. And you could think about running these special Thunderwolf characters alongside as well. Canis can give you extra wolf attacks, and Harold Deathwolf can allow you to use his leadership. Honestly though, they do have a lot of options. You could think about any of these, but I do think it's perfectly viable just to run them on their own with no extra support. From the various buffs, my favourites are probably just the standard rerolls from Wolf Lords and Lieutenants, or perhaps thinking about Stormcaller from a Rune Priest to cover your advance. Now Thunderwolves lost a fair few stratagems going into their new codex, but they still have plenty of options that are very solid on them. Savage Strike for 1 command point can give you +1 to wound on the charge, which to be honest is pretty excellent on basically any unit that you have, and Thunderwolves are no exception. You can spend 2 command points for Pack Hunters if an enemy unit's already in combat. This could give you a 3d6-inch charge where you drop the lowest, and if you do get in then you get to reroll wound rolls with their teeth and claw attacks. This one's okay, I'd say it's a bit situational, it's just a bit pricey compared with some of the other buffs. We mentioned Thane of the Retinue earlier. It's 1 command points to give you something like a frost weapon on the Sergeant. I'd consider it with Wolf Claws, though typically I'd be happy enough just to run a Power Fist or Thunderhammer. You can use Bestial Nature for 1 command points to put yourself in the Assault Doctrine. You can think about countercharging the enemy for 1 command point if they foolishly leave a unit within 6 inches of you. 1 CP for an entire round of Thunderwolf attacks is really powerful. And if you did want to hit just a little bit more accurately, you could think about Keen Senses for 1 command point. They'll ignore penalties to hit with those Thunderhammers and Power Fists, but you do have to deploy it a bit early. You have to declare it at the start of the shooting phase, which isn't quite as easy to anticipate. For stratagems for these guys, Savage Strike is my favourite. Countercharge whenever you can get it, of course. Although the best value that you might get out of a command point is to reroll a failed charge, as you really want these guys to be making contact as soon as possible. So how would I think about using Thunderwolf Cavalry myself in-game then? As I said before, I'd be quite tempted to take units of 5 myself. I think you want a good meaty amount of melee mass, and they're just going to be far harder to incidentally make go away when there's a whole 5 of them. I'd take them all with Storm Shields, and at least some Fists on Hammers for hard targets in the unit, maybe supplemented with a few with Storm Shield and Lightning Claw. Thunderwolves are typically a unit that I'd want to start on the board as opposed to using Strategic Reserve, as that Swift Hunter's rule is really powerful, and you're going to get maximal value out of it by running them up the centre of the board, as opposed to trying to make a charge out of Deep Strike. I would think fairly carefully about where they start. As Cavalry, they're going to be a bit more constrained by terrain, so you do want fairly good movement lanes for them. Light cover isn't as important as their Cavalry, but if you can manage to get them out of line of sight behind obscuring terrain from a bunch of the enemy's guns, then that's no bad thing. Or maybe try and make some use of dense cover, though you would have to make sure that all the wolves are at least somewhat protected. I think as they're fairly durable with those Storm Shields, they're quite a good choice for just running straight up the board and taking enemy fire as they move in. Something's got to, but I think it makes sense to do so alongside other multiple advancing melee threats. maybe other units of Thunderwolves, or combining with other elements deep striking in, such as Wolfguard Terminators for example. If they do have a reasonable chance at a charge, it might well even be worth re-rolling a poor advance roll if it jeopardizes whether they're going to be able to get in. When they make contact with the enemy, things get very simple. I'm sure they're just going to want to bite people into small little tiny pieces. I would try and remember whether you want to use the damage dealing stratagems though. In general, the +1 to wound one is going to be best against most value, unless you're already wounding on 2s with those Thunderhammers, though I'd only use it if the outcome of the melee is in any doubt. Against plenty of targets, these guys are just going to pulverize them anyway. Overall, I do think that Thunderwolf Cavalry are a really strong unit, and certainly have a place in a competitive Space Wolf list at the moment. Compared with other options, I think they do outclass Wolfen at the moment. Wolfen still hits really hard, but they just don't have the same durability that they used to have, and having something that isn't going to die as it moves up is a really big advantage. I would say that the main competition from Thunderwolf Cavalry comes from Wolfguard Terminators and Jump Pack Wolfguard, both of which fill a similar sort of role and can potentially get there via deep strike if they need to. The Terminators also have very decent damage output. They've got some solid chaff clearing shooting with the Stormbolters, and their infantry allowing them to make better use of terrain. Jump Pack Wolfguard do hit just a bit harder than the Thunderwolves, and they're a bit less susceptible to being wiped out by heavy anti-tank firepower. They're a little bit slower without the advance and charge, but they do have the fly keywords, and a big unit of these guys with Storm Shields and Power Fists again seems like another very powerful competitor. Overall, I think that Wolfguard in both their forms and Thunderwolves are all very usable. It's going to be interesting to see what the most competitive Space Wolf players take when they come to making tournament lists. So overall, I do really like the newest incarnation of Thunderwolves. Good to see one of the most iconic Space Wolf units also being very effective on the table, and I must admit I do prefer the look of these models quite a lot compared with Wolfen. Let me know your thoughts on these guys, particularly if you've had any experience with them over the last week since the codex dropped. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about how to use the unit down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be keeping the unit reviews coming, with new 40k stuff coming out pretty much every day. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which is how I keep all of these videos coming quite so regularly. If you are watching quite a bit, then any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few extra advantages, such as seeing new videos early compared with other people, regular votes to see what sort of things happens next on the channel, and automatic entry into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway with a chance to win some big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.